Eden Kaz here with Just Be, and we are about to take a spiritual boom. We are at an unprecedented time in human history where we are transitioning from 3D to 5D within the great spiritual awakening. This video and audio podcast is the place for you to find your truth beyond politics, your sovereignty, your voice. Let's kick up your vibration now. By the way, each episode ends with the Just Be practice to do just that. And as we begin the show, just to know a little bit more about me, I'm a soul realignment specialist, meditation master, and dimensional healer. Learn more, and there's merch also at EdenJustBe.com. Let's get this party started. Eden, Just Be, Spiritual Boom in association with the Grassroots Warriors Network. Welcome, Tim Kelly in Phoenix, Arizona. How are you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. I'm so used to looking at someone face to face, and we had some technical difficulties today. So I'm looking at the artwork. Is this right? The artwork for your books?
Correct. The covers.
And maybe I'll just look at myself a lot during this interview. Okay, so you are a guy that is full, like an encyclopedia of information. It feels like you've been studying what we're going to talk about for years. So I was listening to a 2-hour plus podcast that you shared with me. So I will reference it if people want to go further, knowing we don't have that much time yet. It is jam-packed with stuff. And I'll ask you lots of questions about that. All right. So today I desire potentially to get into the untruths of history, the creation of Atlantis, Edgar Cayce, Tesla, shapeshifting, David Icke. I loved you talking about the mimic octopus, which maybe we'll go into that today. I think that's so neat. Technology of the pyramids. And I want to go ahead and mention your book, Hidden History of Humanity, because this also gives a nod to more that we may talk about. So your book chronicles a story of our ancient past from Atlantis to the present. The book is heavily cross-referenced, so despite the many extraordinary concepts presented, they all have foundation. And just so you know, Tim, the listeners and my community, we all know about this stuff. So bring it on, and I love to hear your perspective. The story showcases the origins of the Great Pyramids, alien visitors founding lost civilizations, how most major myths and religions are tied to a single story, giants, magic, and mysticism, supernatural abilities that stagger, I love that word that you used, that stagger the imagination, like humans that could fly, shape-shifting beings, and conferences with spirits through special mirrors. Okay, I have 2 more things to add, yet I want to go ahead and ask you, Tim, how did you start getting into this and discovering the truths? What drove you to this?
You know, ultimately, when I look back on it, I do think this is sort of a matter of the soul. I think that when you're incarnated, you have missions and you're going to pursue those missions one way or another. So when I was a very little kid, I remember being shown all these books and just absorbing information. And one of the first things that kind of like spiritually
wait a minute. Who showed you these books?
Well, I love to read, so people were constantly shoving books in my direction. Usually things that they were interested in, they wanted someone else to read and explain to them. But in any event,
right,
I would see a book, and one of the books I saw before I was even in first grade showed me the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And there was just something about that when I saw it that jolted me. And I memorized all 7 wonders before I even got into first grade. And I remember when I was in first grade, when we had library class, they said, okay, so there's going to be this little period where you can sit and go look at books, whatever books you want to look at. For some reason, I went straight to the section on ancient Egypt, and I started pulling things out and I started reading them.
Wow.
So I knew early on that I wanted to write, and I primarily thought I wanted to write fiction, but I had almost no idea about the world I was living in. I was a tiny little kid, but I started being exposed to different genres, and as I was exposed to each genre, I grew interested and thought, okay, this is the one I'm going to write in. So I first saw a mystery book. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write mysteries. Then I saw fantasy, thought I'd write fantasy, science fiction, and so on, until I was in 6th grade. And then this idea hit me like a thunderbolt of what I really wanted to do after all those prior years of growth. And what I really wanted to do was to write a 20-novel saga about an interdisciplinary genius who designs and builds a paradise city against the full force opposition of hell. So when I was in eighth grade, I worked out 20 plots, and the goal was largely to sweep through the most important ideas in all human experience and cover that in the span of these 20 novels. So as a teenager, I began doing research along those lines to pull off that goal. And then my life hit a number of detours in my early 20s, and there's a whole lot I could say on that that would take up too much time. But eventually, it led to the creation of a three-dimensional periodic table of the elements, which I was not expecting. And I shared that with scientists from around the world, scientists in 30 different countries. And I was hoping to get 30 to 40% support, because when you do something new, you usually don't get that much support. It doesn't matter who you are. And I got about 95% support, and that was shocking. I was like, wow, I can't believe that many people are on board with a new idea of how the atom is structured. So then I went to the scientific journals and I said, can you please publish a paper on this? And they all slammed the door in my face. They had wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't refute the theory. They didn't even want to hear the theory. And I thought, okay, so what is going on here? So that led me to research global history and corruption. That led me to the book in turn called Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries by Jonathan Eisen. And when I read that, then I knew the world I was living in. It was not what I thought it was. And so then I started researching global corruption, and eventually that ended up in writing the book, Hidden History of Humanity. So that's sort of a nutshell version.
Okay, real quick, because I have two things to do, and then I want to go into your official bio. This is not real quick, but in the sixth and eighth grade, I mean, did you have friends? Were you just like, and how old are you now?
I am in my 50s.
You're in your 50s. Okay. Did you have friends, or were they just like, you seem so top, so smart. Like it feels like it would be hard to engage in TV and music. And could you do that?
Yes, it was a very bizarre set of circumstances under which
Okay.
I grew up. I was an adopted child, so I was kind of an alien to everybody. I didn't know like what
Wow.
my ethnicity was even supposed to be. So I
Okay.
sort of was like a mystery even to myself. And then when I got interested in all these different things, I was definitely strange to a lot of people. I had more than one person, suggest I might be an alien. Now, of course, in my own thoughts, I was thinking to myself, maybe the other people are aliens. Maybe I'm the only person who's natural. But in any case, yeah, there was just this strong motivation to pursue these things. And one of the things that was slightly advantageous about my childhood was that all my friends were way older than I was. Most of them were 2 or 3 years older. So,
Okay.
and they were also very into sports. And at first, people were a little concerned about me hanging out with people who were older than I was and who were really grounded in sports. But it ended up being a good source of being a well-rounded individual, because
Wow.
I could read when I went home and draw and do music and do all these other things that I wanted to do. But I could still relate to other people. And I
Yeah.
still remember to this day this one athlete who had heard about my reputation, and he had never seen me play sports. And then he saw me play sports, and he said to a friend of mine, I had no idea that guy could be an athlete. So it was good to be well-rounded as I
Yeah.
was, but the friendships were strange. I mean, most of the time people couldn't fully relate to me, but
Yeah.
there were, always basic things that you can do with guys to play sports and have a good time. And I did have a few friends who also enjoyed reading, and we could have discussions to some extent, never to the full extent that I wanted. I have two friends to this day who are very interested in the topics that I'm interested in,
Hmm.
but both of them I've noticed have a tendency to fall asleep when I'm talking to them, because I just have too much information for
Oh my gosh. Well, they need to wake up. Okay. Stay tuned, Tim. That's a beautiful intro. All right. Two things I wanted to discuss. And y'all know I'm going to bring this up multiple times. Episode 188, and we're on 202 right now with Tim. Gold IRA scams. I feel that this is one, all the shows I love. I just feel that this one is really significant right now. So please check that out, because I was involved and one, and the beautiful folks from Miles Franklin that I was connected to spent 2 months with me to get me out of it. I'm going to go ahead and say the names. I was with Gold Co. and Birch Gold. A lot of the big names are so entrenched in this, and Miles Franklin has also watched a whole bunch of people being hurt and losing money. So, anyway, check out the episode. They go more into this. Yet, if you feel that you are in one, contact info@milesfranklin.com and put my name, Eden, in the subject line. Kevin, they're putting a team together to help people. And if you want to invest, I trust these guys completely. This is a real experience for me. And then I wanted to go ahead. I just read this today and I want to talk about it. So these are not my words, but as y'all know, we are in an ascension rebirth. Okay, I'm show my pink papers here. Okay, and I'm just going to read it. The ascension rebirth is unique in that you are also experience the death of your old 3D false self, and in the middle of it, that self has been riddled with energies and implants that have been comfortable or natural to you as a human soul. This is a self that is now being peeled off of you, knowing that a lot of you guys might be experiencing some really crazy stuff right now. Okay, releasing all its traumas, regrets, unfulfilled dreams, unresolved relationships, and false beliefs, all its miserable entanglements in the false matrix that humanity has lived for thousands of years. So hang in there, you peeps. We are doing amazing stuff right now. All right, let's go right into Tim. This is your bio. Tim is the founder of Polytope Press. Did I say that correctly?
Correct.
All right. And author of Natural Healing Self Empowerment, Optiflex, Hidden History of Humanity, and multiple novels, including The Math Wizard, which is an attempt to resurrect the original 7-step path to enlightenment once offered in Atlantis. He also created a 3D periodic table, which we've talked about, of the elements, new theory of the origins of species, and has written articles on independent homesteads. His company is focused on actualizing every aspect of an optimal civilization. Heck yeah, because I feel that that's what we are moving towards. Okay, and you talked about starting to discover, because my first actual question was going to be when you discovered the awakening. I call it many things: 3D to 5D, the Matrix, the lies in history, and you talked about discovering or going into the corruption. Okay, explain that again for a moment.
Okay. Well, and to go back to the question you were asking a second ago,
Yeah.
it was actually just prior to in finding the book, Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries. It was sort of in the aftermath of trying to figure out why the scientific community was not interested in evidence-based theory on the atom, that I was looking for answers. And I happened to watch Oliver Stone's JFK picture. And after I watched that, I was really thinking about it a lot. I've done research my entire life. So I thought, okay, I end up researching everything. Might as well research the Kennedy assassination. So
Yeah.
I started researching that. And eventually I was led to this website that was going over different theories in relation to that. One such theory was the idea that the banks did it. I left because I had sort of had conflicts with banks my whole life. So I said, okay, whoever has the theory that banks did it, I want to read that one. So I read that book, and it was called Kill Zone: A Sniper Looks at Dealey Plaza, written by a former police officer who scouted the scene at Dealey Plaza, thoroughly researched. And when I finished that book, I thought, wow, okay, there is a lot more going on in this world than I ever dreamed. When I did public speaking as a teenager, I did an event called Extemporaneous, where you had 30 minutes to prepare a 5 to 7 minute speech on current events. I was aware that the world was corrupt, but I had no idea that it was going to be that corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And once I saw what Roberts presented in his book, I knew where to look now. In the age of the internet, I had keywords that I didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
So I could use those and start doing some deeper digging. That led me to the book Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries. One of the sections of Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries concerned suppressed healing methods. And I had not heard of those before.
Oh, yeah.
So I started researching those and double checking and testing. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that because technically I'm a writer. I'm not a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had that knowledge on standby. But then a friend of mine was sick with mold exposure, and he was apparently about to die.
Oh, man.
He had come to me and he said, next month you can have all my possessions. I'm going to be dead. And I said, whoa, okay, that's a little intense. I just read this book on suppressed healing methods. we could try some of these if you'd like. And he looked at me like, you're the science guy. You pick something and we'll do it. And so I picked something and we did it and he survived and he was perfectly fine. And at that point, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to do a lot more with this. So that was kind of how I got started.
What methods did y'all utilize?
I had a whole bunch of different ones I could have chosen from, but I
Yeah.
chose oxygen therapy.
Okay. And how did you do that? Because where did you get the oxygen? How did you implement that?
So there's a ton of different ways to do it. If you read the books of Preston Inventions and Other Discoveries and look at the oxygen chapters, it references a journalist actually who was also not a doctor. His name is Ed McCabe, and he
Okay.
had written a book called Oxygen Therapy, and then later he did a follow-up book called Flood Your Body with Oxygen. So there are a variety of protocols you can use in oxygen therapy. Some of them can be used by the average individual casually. Others do require a doctor for proper administration.
Hmm.
But the basic ones that you can do on your own are working with hydrogen peroxide. And you can also work with ozone as well.
Hmm.
So I got information on how to work with the food grade hydrogen peroxide, and he got that into his system, and his blood started to get a lot better, and he began to heal right away.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And was he freaked out by that? Something that simple?
He was a little freaked out by that, but he got more freaked out later as the research went on. Because I remember one time we were out driving, and I looked over to him and I said, we cannot just keep you alive here from this mold exposure. We can probably cure your diabetes as well. Like, you're crazy. And I said, nope, we can. So we started going over a bunch of different approaches, including the Gerson therapy, where you eat a lot of natural fruits and vegetables. And
Mhm.
he gives me a call one day and he said, no, no, you don't understand. My blood sugar is really, really low. It's not, I was told it could never go this low. And I said, no, it can. So, was when he was probably most shocked when he saw those results.
Wow. And how do you spell the? I'm not familiar with that one. I'm not even going to say it.
Gerson, Gerson, in Natural Healing Self Empowerment. I have a link to a documentary that was put together on Gerson's work. He was a pioneer in initially Germany, and he
Okay.
came over to the US in about the 1930s. His initial interest was in getting rid of migraines because he was having a lot of migraines, and he wanted
Okay.
to know if there was something he could do. And then it occurred to him, well, maybe if I start eating better, I'll have
Okay.
fewer migraines. So he started eating some natural fruits and vegetables, and the migraines went away. And when he was helping somebody who had migraines and lupus, he found that when they ate natural fruits and vegetables, the migraines and the lupus went away. And so then he kept
Man,
going until he was curing cancer. And then he cured cancer more than 50 times. His testimony has been presented to Congress. So this is a
of
matter of
course.
record. He passed on his methods to his daughter Charlotte, who ran a clinic, and you can see her in the documentary. And as far as mainstream science was concerned, they were not happy about using nature to heal people with cancer.
Yeah.
And eventually, Dr. Gerson, according to the documentary, was murdered by arsenic poisoning.
And I did have a question to ask you in terms of Tesla dying and Rife, which is really interesting. I think I've heard of Gerson before. It's just been a while. I yeah. Can you talk about their deaths?
In the documentary, which is linked in my book, you can hear about the suspicious circumstances under which Gerson died,
Hmm.
probably due to arsenic poisoning. Arsenic, no, I think this is true. I'm trying to remember precisely. We can check this easily enough, but I believe element 33 in the periodic table of the elements is arsenic.
Okay.
And it appears as if Tesla also was murdered by a combination of poisoning and or strangling. So it could have been both.
Wow.
But he was getting very close to doing some very important work, which we may get
Hmm.
back to. But one of the things that is said about Tesla is that he had visited the psychic Edgar Cayce, who had told him he was a reincarnated Atlantean. And if you go into Tesla's work in his plan at Wardenclyffe Tower in New York to broadcast free power to the world, he seems to have been doing so along the lines of the technology that was once used in the Great Pyramid in Egypt.
Wow. And how do you know how Rife was like? Wasn't it also like he was destitute. Like again, when these beautiful natural cures to cancer happen, and energy from Tesla, wasn't he like had money and then was destitute? Do you know about him?
I do indeed. Yeah, he's
Okay,
linked in the book
okay, of
as well as several
course you
documentaries,
know.
and he was driven to drink.
Yeah, okay.
Unfortunately, he was just so stressed out by his lack of positive reception. I mean,
Hmm.
initially when his work was first coming out, he had pioneered a number of methods that were of extreme importance. I know Western medicine relies on something called the germ theory of disease.
Yep.
And this is the idea that microbes cause our pathology. And what Rife developed was a form of destructive resonance. He also developed a superior microscope.
Hmm.
So the theory with microscopes is that if you have a light-based microscope, it can only perceive or magnify up to about 2000 degrees magnification. But what Rife found was that if he used special quartz prisms, he could split the light into its constituent frequencies and attain a magnification using light at 17,000 times. He was seeing things that no human being had ever seen before. And what he
Wow.
saw were microbes that were shapeshifting from one form to another, but each one had a destructive resonant frequency. He found microbes associated with the cause of cancer and was able to find their what he called mortal oscillatory rate and destructively resonate them into oblivion, curing cancer 400 times in a row with a 100% success rate.
Hmm.
His microscope was banished, and at first he had celebration in the newspapers announcing the end of all disease in the fateful decade of the 1930s again. And there was going to be this great celebration, and then suddenly the medical institutions heard about it and shut it all down because it was basically being run by the Rockefellers and big pharma and big chemistry, and
Hmm.
they did not want to see people healed this way. So the methodology was effectively crushed, and his legacy was buried. But again, if you wish to learn more about it, read my book and check out the links to documentaries. You can still see those to this day.
Thank you. And I want to ask this question: How are you spiritual? And knowing everything that you've discovered, and you are like, it's so neat. I feel I could ask you questions on almost any topic, and you'd be able to answer them so astutely. All right, tell me, are you spiritual? Let's
I
go with
am.
that. Okay, what does that mean for you?
Okay, so I get into all of that in both my fiction and my nonfiction, but in broad strokes,
Yeah.
I look at life in the following way. I have a belief in what I call the one, which is basically all of us are part of the same cosmic energy. I'm sure
Mhm.
you're familiar with the phrase namaste.
Yeah.
I bow to the God within you. So that's sort of a nod to that, that there is a divine divinity inside all of us, and that we're all part of one being. So in that sense, there's a term that is sometimes used, immanent, not I-M-M-I, but I-M-M-A,
Hmm.
God that exists in all things. So especially when they're in their natural musical form, where everything is in the right ratio and harmony, that suggests that there is this godlike presence in everything. And then beyond all of that, beyond the one, is a being I call the transcendent, which is the being that is omniscient, omnipotent, omniscient, on the highest octave of existence. So for me, reality is subdivided into frequencies like radio stations.
Hmm.
And as you change frequencies, you can tune to a different reality. The more positive you are, the more you will encounter your ability to make your thoughts reality and experience more positive realms of being. And you just basically tune your soul to an operating frequency, like tuning to a radio station. And the reality you're experiencing is the one that you're tuning into. You can also choose to become negative if you want to, and you
Yeah.
can head down to hell if that's your goal. Or you can move positively, which is to me the definition of ascension. It's increasing your frequency so that you attune to higher frequency realms that are more positive, more full of love and harmony and beauty.
Do you feel that we are in the process of that now?
I feel that we are being presented with options. Do you
Yeah.
want to go up or do you want to go down?
Yeah.
The decision making process is intensifying because the environment is polarizing. So it's basically forcing you to make a spiritual choice. You can choose whatever you want to choose. It's not that your life is automatically going to get better. You
Yeah.
have to choose to attune to it. You have to make the choice. Do you want to go further to the dark side or further to the positive side? Because it's being shown to you in spades right now what the options are.
You are exactly right on that. And it is so interesting right now how some people are fighting tooth and nail to stay in, let's call it the hell part, that, and knowing that it's been so ingrained in so many of us that this is how you live and this is how, you get up every day, you go to work and you do like so much of the program, but they are so programmed. And I know it's so hard to break free from that, yet it's just to watch. Sometimes it's hard to watch. Would you agree, or where are you? What stance do you take on that?
Absolutely. I think it's very difficult to watch. I know that there was a time in relation to one of my novels in the saga, one of the more spiritual novels, where the main character
Yeah.
is kind of grappling with his own direction.
Uh-huh.
And his ideas initially were just about himself, thinking, in other words, if I can just improve myself,
Yeah.
then all by myself, I'm going to transcend this realm and go to another frequency. And I was reflecting on that these past few years. And so far as I can tell, it might not work that way. It may be a process of, yes, you do have to do everything you can to improve as an individual. But if the collective environment is going to change, then we do need several people to also collectively want to change this vibration, want to
Mhm.
change this reality. It can't just be one person in isolation unless that person is, of extreme strength.
Mhm.
But we really do need to get a number of people awakened to very basic ideas like we need to have healthy water in our
Yeah.
bodies. We need to have healthy food in our bodies.
Yeah.
We have to be pursuing freedom and independence to the greatest extent that we possibly can. We have to be aware of environmental toxins. We have to be aware of the dangers of things like electromagnetic fields and artificial intelligence. So I do think the individual can do a great deal, but it also seems to be part of our path to reach out to others because the more people around us who are vibrating at a higher frequency, the more the entire reality is likely to change.
Oh my gosh, man, I really enjoy talking with you. I really do. Because, yeah, I feel I am in resonance with that. And that's one of the reasons I do the show is to bring us together to have even the show vibrate at a high level. And part of it is to bring truths to the world, which again, that's sometimes hard to hear, yet to also to know that you have to know that these things are going on so you can consciously make a choice. I really, really great description on that, Tim. Thank you. Can we go into your perception of Atlantis? And I know the one podcast I listened to, there was there was a lineage, or not. That's not the word I'm looking for. To get to that point, knowing that we're just going to dive straight into it. Are you okay with that?
Totally okay with that.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank
It's one
you.
of my favorite topics.
All right, let's go.
In relation to Atlantis, I realized that with a lot of the information that people have been presented with, there could be plenty of confusion. Some
Yeah.
people believe that Atlantis is a myth. It's just an allegory. It never actually existed. Then they
Mm,
place it all over planet Earth, and some people are trying to place it on another planet. But no, all my research converges on a very clear idea that Atlantis was a continent that existed in the Atlantic Ocean. It is
mm,
referenced not only by Plato, but by multiple sources, including Crantor, Diodorus of Sicily. There's a Roman sophist Elian citing an unnamed Greek historian who stated that the residents of Atlantis lived on an island surrounded by water, that they had twice our height and days, meaning that they stood, generally speaking, twice as tall and lived twice as long as the average human being. So I did a ton of research into Atlantis and found the following. If you look at a map or a globe of planet Earth, you can
mhm.
locate the Great Pyramid of Egypt at Giza in Egypt at approximately 30 degrees latitude. And if you go exactly 90 degrees west of Giza, at a point where a hypothetical cube could be inserted into the sphere of the Earth, where would its corners touch? One such location is the Great Pyramid of Giza. Another such location would be the Bermuda Triangle. And that is exactly where I believe Poseidonis, the capital of Atlantis, was located. So what did Plato tell us in his dialogues about Atlantis? He said that a god named Poseidon mated with a mortal woman named Cleito and gave birth to 10 twins. These 10 twins are named, the first of which is Atlas. These 10 twins in turn mated with 7 women known as the Pleiades, interestingly enough. And from them came a bloodline of demigods. Now, it is my contention that these demigods led to Cro-Magnon man, who suddenly appears in the fossil record of planet Earth at approximately 30,000 BC. And now we know from tribes that exist to this day, such as the Guanches and the Berbers, who have close ties to the Azores and the Canary Islands, which are remnants of Atlantis. These beings had blonde hair and blue eyes. So what we are led to eventually is that the god described by Plato, Poseidon, was probably not a god and was probably a Pleiadian with blonde hair and blue eyes. And most of the Pleiadians apparently had gold or blonde hair, blue eyes, fair skin, stood very tall, very beautiful. And they came here to enlighten us and protect us from threats that they were well aware existed. Now, why would they be aware that these threats existed? Between Mars and Jupiter is located an asteroid belt. Now, some people have theories as to what that asteroid belt is or why it's there, but the best theory appears to be that that was once a planet that orbited between Mars and Jupiter and was destroyed in a cosmic war. Now, who fought that cosmic war? It appears as if the darkest forces in this entire cosmos derive from the Draco constellation, a reptilian group of people who are predators. Apparently, according to the testimony of Len Kasten, which you can see in interviews that I have linked at a new paper at my website on cosmic origins, it appears as if the Draco confronted the positive life force in the solar system, well, not in the cosmos, I should say, in the Lyran constellation. According to Kasten, they destroyed 3 planets and millions of lives were lost. So at that point, the universe had been introduced to the strongest force of negativity that there was, and conflicts then ensued throughout the entire cosmos. And people began to flee these conflicts because they didn't want to fight. So one such group appears to have been a group from the star system of Sirius, who settled on this planet that used to exist between Mars and Jupiter. And they were trying to find their way, probably much like humans, although they were not necessarily very human. So far as I can tell, they were amphibious, they had blue skin, they had elongated skulls, they had tails like a fish, but they were still intelligent and still trying to optimize their own civilization to the best of their ability. Mm-hmm. Then it appears a group from Orion, allied to the Draco, showed up, tried to turn this planet, which is called by different names in the literature. It's sometimes called Tiamat, Phaeton, Maldek. But they tried to turn the Maldekians more towards the dark side. And then the Pleiadians showed up trying to encourage people more to the positive side.
Yeah.
The story goes, according to a Y-Files episode, that they reached a point of artificial intelligence starting to take everything over. And they began to get very upset with this. And the Syrians started to rebel and started saying, look, the artificial intelligence is going too far. We no longer want to associate with you. A conflict ensued and the planet was exploded. And so now we have debris going through our solar system. So I believe that the Pleiadians who had shown up at Maldek trying to encourage people towards harmony, towards working with nature instead of working against it. Same thing here, eventually when conditions were right on planet Earth. I do believe that the Syrians came to this planet a long time ago and founded this civilizations known to us as Lemuria and Mu. Lemuria would have been located in the Indian Ocean, and Mu would be located in the Pacific Ocean. These civilizations eventually went under, but the Atlanteans, founded by the Pleiadians, came down trying to enlighten mankind. They are the only species who apparently looks just like us. So why do we look the way that we do? Because we look like them, because we were made in their image. And they were trying to guide us on the path to enlightenment. They had developed a 7-step program to do this, and the demigods apparently turned away from it when misled by shapeshifting reptilians who had infiltrated Atlantis. The story is reinforced by Len Kasten in interviews that I have linked at my website. But I have multiple sources that do sort of agree on the same general story. And for people who are curious, how much evidence do we have archaeologically that Atlantis was there? There's a book called Atlantis, the Eighth Continent by Charles Berlitz, and they have done some undersea exploration. Masonry walls have been found underneath the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so yes, there was indeed a civilization that once existed in the Atlantic Ocean, and they had mastered, according to Edgar Casey, an extremely sophisticated form of technology, which if we were to embrace that, we would have the path to freedom and spiritual enlightenment to this day. But the demigods did choose to turn away from this. They did choose to turn away from this. And as Plato describes in his dialogue, the 10 princes of Atlantis gathered in the capital of Atlantis. They sacrificed a bull. They threw its blood on a sacred pillar. They burned the bull. They ate part of the bull. These practices do not sound healthy to me. It seems quite clear that they had been introduced to devil worship practices, which include blood sacrifices. And we have been paying the price of that ever since. Eventually, their negative behavior, especially on the eastern side of Atlantis, because the continent had been split into pieces. On the eastern side was a subdivision of an island called Arian. And then north of that was an island called Og or Ogygia, which was closer to Ireland. And then the western side had an island called Poseidia. And in these conflicts, it seems like the capital of Atlantis, Poseidonus, was the more positive spiritual center, and Tritonus, which was the metropolis to the east, had turned more to the dark side, to lower frequency forces, to conquest, to trade, money, all that type of thing. And eventually, all this negative behavior resulted in the destruction of Atlantis when a comet storm hit the Earth, and the wiser people who were trying to prepare defenses for Atlantis were not able to carry those defenses to their full capability because of the corruption, and Atlantis was lost.
Okay. All right. Let me, beautiful description. I'm just formulating in my head. So your perception and from your studies was that a comet storm destroyed Atlantis, because I've also heard that the Atlanteans became so greedy that they ran everything into the ground.
Well, it's in some ways it's a combination of both.
Okay.
We know that the Tritonians, the people who were close to the capital, the metropolis that was on the eastern side of Atlantis, they had created an invasion force. This is also described by Plato in his Timaeus dialogue, and they had set out to conquer all of Europe, and they were repulsed by an ancient Athena. So when I say ancient Athena, I mean a truly ancient Athena. There was apparently an Atlantean legacy colony that had been set up in Greece called Arcadia, or the Pelasgians, alternately. And Athena and her forces repulsed the invasion force that was trying to take over all of Europe. And it was around that time that a comet storm came and sank everything. But part of my theory of Great Pyramids and their purpose, I do believe that there were 8 major ones that were planned, and they were planned as a planetary shield to protect the entire planet from the debris from the exploded planet. And because so many people were abusing the high-powered technology of Atlantis for primarily its giant power crystals, they were destroying the environment and using these as weapons of war rather than as capabilities for defense.
Wow. Okay. And I wanted to ask you, Tim, in terms of pyramids being all over the earth and hidden currently, what do you think about that?
Okay, so there are degrees of functionality for Great Pyramid. So there are several things to keep in mind with pyramids. First of all, the definition of a Great Pyramid. Just because you have something in a pyramid shape does not make it a Great Pyramid. It will make it a pyramid, doesn't make it a Great Pyramid. Okay. A Great Pyramid is defined by its slope. It has to have a specific slope that squares the circle. It's basically harmonic to the planet on which it sits. So the Great Pyramid in Egypt, for example, has a mass, which is a precise fractional mass of the entire mass of the planet. If you go from the center of the base of the Great Pyramid to the top of its capstone that is a precise fraction of what's called the polar radius. If you go around the perimeter base of the Great Pyramid, it multiplies out precisely to the mathematical dimensions of the equator. So the entire Great Pyramid is harmonized to the planet on which it sits, and it does have to be that way in order for it to perform its many functions. So let me talk about the degrees of functionality of a Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
This is usually of great interest to a lot of people. So there's basically 4 tiers that I describe. So the first tier is food preservation. Several people have done experiments along these lines with a pyramid shape that you can put certain pieces of food inside a pyramid device, and it tends to have a very slow rate of decay, or in some cases, maybe if you design a perfect pyramid, almost no rate of decay. That would be of great importance to ancient people. They didn't use refrigerators. They would use life force fields to preserve their food. And I do think that the second wonder of the ancient world, getting back to my childhood visions, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, I do believe that that's actually directly related to the Great Pyramid in Egypt, because one of the things that the Great Pyramid could do was light up and turn night to day. Now, how could it possibly do that? If we look at Tesla's research, he mentions that if you oscillate calcium sulfide at 10,000 hertz, it will give off cold phosphorescent light. It's like a glow-in-the-dark toy, I guess you could say, but it's cold to the touch. It's extremely efficient, and it's like the sun. What does that mean? That means that when plants are in the presence of a Great Pyramid that is glowing, they can grow food at night, even when the sun's not shining. So this would have enhanced the food production capability all around the Great Pyramid. And as Tony Bushby, an author, describes in his book, Secret in the Bible, the original Babylon was actually Cairo. So I know that we're familiar with the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and think of Babylon in Iraq, but the original Babylon was actually Cairo, right by the Great Pyramid. So I think the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were all the food that was grown in the light of the Great Pyramid. The second degree of functionality for a Great Pyramid was as a telecommunications device. And this is backed up by a multitude of sources. So it appears as if, just like you have today, radio antennas for major radio stations you can see when you're driving around, the top of the pyramid, the capstone, act as a resonant signal transmitter that was telecommunicating with all other devices that were harmonic to the capstone of the Great Pyramid. And this was apparently done through the use of prisms, which is perfectly valid from a physics standpoint, because when you're sending signals, you want to have your signals be unique and not intercepted. So you have to encode your signals in such a way that, you know, let's say your phone conversation doesn't overlap with somebody else's phone conversation through the same telecommunications network. And Casey describes the use of prisms to do this. So that makes sense. You have light that can be split into different frequencies. So each frequency carries its own signal, its own conversation, its own set of video, whatever. And this was done through the capstone of the Great Pyramid. So that's the second level of functionality. Third level of functionality was discovered by Tesla. This was the broadcasting not just of communication signals, but of power itself. As Casey is describing in his visions of Atlantis, there were ships that were flying through the sky whose primary means of motive power was not on the ship. The power was being broadcast to the ship to enable it to fly. This is exactly what Tesla was trying to set up. This is what the Great Pyramids could do. This is what was done in Atlantis through its great crystals. They were broadcasting power to all devices that needed them. Tesla was saying that this power was broadcast etherically. This is a very important point. Ether in physics has not been disproven. I know that people who are trained in conventional physics, as I was, were told that ether was proven not to exist. It does exist. Tesla works with it. Reich, the famous pioneer who worked with life force and life force accumulator boxes, also worked with ether. There's another author, Baron von Reichenbach, who wrote an entire book on the subject, researches into the vital force. So yes, you can work with ether, and what it does is it flows through space. It does not harm any birds, does not harm any bees, does not harm any human beings. It is perfectly safe to all life. And then when the etheric signals hit a device that's appropriately designed, they induce an electron flow, which is important to devices that work electrically. So in other words, you broadcast signals on a high frequency that is harmless, and then when it hits the right device, it creates electricity in that device to make it work. So this is what the Atlanteans were able to do. And then finally, at the highest level, a Great Pyramid was capable of a defensive capability. It could isolate a target, and if the target was sufficiently annoying, it could sub-nuclearly annihilate that target. It could overload it with so much energy it would be destroyed. Now, for authors like Joseph Farrell, that sounds extremely sinister. He has a very sinister outlook on the Great Pyramid with all the research he's done in his Giza
Huh.
Death Star trilogy. But
Oh.
I don't look at it that way. But for me, I think what was going on was that they understood the greatest threats were not necessarily, let's say, human constructs or reptilian constructs. They
Mhm.
were concerned primarily, I think, about asteroids, comets, things that were huge that could
Mhm.
destroy this planet. They needed something to maybe take those out if they threatened the Earth.
Right. I've never heard anyone theorize negative things about the pyramids. So that's interesting that you brought that up. Shifting gears for just a second, in terms of shape shifting reptilians, I it was really interesting on the other podcast. You were like, okay, because you're very much let's dive into this and see if there's anything on the planet now on planet Earth that does that. And you found the mimic octopus. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So I had heard the idea of shape shifting from David Icke, and I wasn't
Yeah.
sure what was going on with that. But then he wasn't inventing that all by himself. He was
Hmm.
saying that he had interviewed women such as Kathy O'Brien, and she
Hmm.
said that she had seen the president of Mexico shapeshift into a reptile. She said that she saw the Bennett brothers, some of which were involved in the educational program for the United States, shapeshift into reptiles. She saw several other people doing this. There were women who were sort of overseers at dark rituals, and that they said they also saw people shapeshifting.
Yeah.
So then the question was, okay, so if we try to understand this, what is this? What is this? So at first I was thinking, okay, maybe it's technological, maybe they have a hologram projector and they're doing something like that to just really intimidate people. But as I got deeper in the research, I said, not, it just appears that that's not the case. This seems to be something biological that they're doing. And the
Hmm.
more I got tuned to shapeshifting, the more I began to see it when I was not expecting to see it. So, in other words, there are videos where people say, "Here, look at this person shapeshifts," and you watch it and it looks like somebody's shapeshifting. But then you say to yourself, "Okay, but if someone's giving me a video and they're telling me that somebody's going to shapeshift, maybe somebody photoshopped that video to make
Yeah.
it look like that." But then I was watching like live TV and I started seeing people shapeshifting, and I was like, "Okay, I knew what to look for."
Okay.
And
So, like
so
what? Give me an example. What were you watching?
I was watching CNN. And
Oh man,
I was watching
they
one of the
live.
reporters who is known to be very polarizing, always talking about everyone being a racist and something like that. And she was just going through a little segment, and I saw part of her face shift. And it's
Yeah.
usually when they get really emotional and
Yeah.
worked up that they start shifting. And so I saw that, and I've seen it on several other people who are doing newscasts and stuff like that. I'll see their
Hmm.
eyes will start to go. Usually their pupils will start to shift
Hmm.
and become vertical slits. And sometimes you see skin patches on the neck or on the cheek will start to change. And then
Hmm.
there's the weird teeth thing, which is
Hmm.
especially bizarre, but their teeth will actually start to change. I have no idea how you can shapeshift that far. It'd have to be like cartilage or something like that. But when I was trying to understand how this could even be possible biologically, I asked myself, are there any animals on planet Earth that can shapeshift? So I plugged it in as a question to a search engine, and it said, yes, a mimic octopus can shapeshift. And I said, okay. So I pulled up videos to this thing on YouTube, and I started watching it perform, and I was like, whoa, I never saw anything do anything like this before. This creature is unique on planet Earth. If you watch this thing drift around the ocean floor, you will not only see it change color, but it will change mass and it will mimic other species. It mimics a scorpion fish, for example.
Hmm.
It mimics something so bizarre. It had like two legs and was like running across the ocean floor. That was one of the strangest things I saw it shift into. It
Wow.
doesn't just shift mass and it doesn't just shift color. It tries to behave exactly like the creatures that it's imitating, including a snake. It even, I mean, you'd think, how does a freaking octopus try to transform itself into a snake? But it
Yeah.
can pull off a decent snake impersonation. You have to actually watch these videos to see what I'm talking about, but they're linked at my website on the history page. So just scroll down and you can see some of these videos for yourself showing that natural shape shifting is possible. So
It's possible.
I'm guessing that the Draco either encountered a species that was like the mimic octopus, or maybe they natively were like that on their home planet. And they said to themselves, hey, this is like the perfect way to infiltrate a planet. We can shapeshift into these people that we're trying to conquer, and we can infiltrate among them and pretend like we're just like them.
We are just like
and
them.
Just lead them to the dark side. And it seems like this was going on repeatedly. In Hidden History of Humanity, there's a story going back to, well, what's supposed to be ancient India. It's a story told in the Mahabharata about these sacrifices that were going on, and about how the people of India were trying to repel shape-shifting reptilians who had infiltrated their society. This is in the Mahabharata. So there's a multitude of sources. Rene Boulay, who wrote a book called Flying Serpents and Dragons, states that in Sri Lanka, there was a reptilian base where these repulsive reptilians lived, and the Chinese did an ancient trade with them. They were so repulsive that they never met face to face. So they did their trade. They would bring these objects and they would lay them down outside the facility, and the reptiles would craft devices or products, and they would place them down with a price. And then the Chinese would show up when there was no reptilians present. They would see the price by the object, and they would leave the money. And then they could take the object, and then later the reptiles would show up and remove the money that had been placed on the ground. So, I mean, this is just strange stuff that I did not encounter until I did this research.
Okay, I want to ask you this, Tim, a totally different thought. Do you have any? Okay, I will tell you, for Three Eye Atlas, for me, I feel so positive about it, knowing that as long as it's still on its path, that it will come closest to Earth December 19th. I was just reading something too, a video where it is going to help ignite humanity's psychic powers. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm trying to remain neutral on that for now.
Yes.
I've heard so many different things on it. The stories are all over the map. I did hear someone say recently they thought it was a Galactic Federation ship, which would be the alliance that had formed to repel the reptilians in general from just our entire cosmos. I've had some people say it was a comet. Some people are saying that's somewhat under intelligent control. Some people are linking it to an incident in the late 70s where a signal was broadcast, but then no further signals came from that direction until this object apparently started coming from that direction. We do know, of course, about Project Bluebeam, that for a long time the Cabal has had this secret wish that they could pull out an alien card and get everyone to do whatever they want them to do. That's something, of course, we have to watch out for. Regardless of what the truth is about Three Eye Atlas, we have to be concerned about what we're told the truth is about Three Eye Atlas.
Exactly.
What are people on Earth going to tell us to do? Oh, okay, well, it's this. So can you please give us all the money in your bank account? Or is there something bizarre? We have no idea what they're going to tell us to do in relation to that. But I look at it individually. And I would also add, since a friend of mine called me out the other day saying, hey, did you hear about this comet? I was like, yeah, I've been on that for months. But in any case, in relation to that, I would say my understanding is, and hard for me to produce evidence, this is just a really strong gut feeling, is that our entire planet is surrounded by visitors right now, positive and negative. And so I'm thinking that whatever's going on, they're in a much better position to handle a comet than a guy like me who, doesn't have that much money and has trouble getting groceries sometimes. So I'm going to sort of leave that up to them to deal with those big pictures. And I'm going to do my little part to try and help human beings be healthy and free with free energy and all that kind of stuff. We'll see what happens.
Great. I want to go into the Just Be practice in a second, yet I want to open the door to one more question. Or is there anything, like, in terms of discoveries that just knocked your socks off? Is there anything that you would just like to share that you've learned that it's just, you feel is just pivotal information, even though all of this is pivotal information, but just one more thing?
Okay, so I might as well talk about one of the most recent things, because it is probably one of the most important aspects of it. So I do a lot of health research that's available in natural healing self-empowerment, and I talk about a lot of basics that I'm sure people would be interested in, like stopping the common cold, getting rid of all allergies, getting rid of all disease. That stuff is kind of basic. The stuff that I think is more advanced and much more interesting are the possibilities for human regeneration. And so for me, my research has just been pioneering in that through blood building. And what I found is that human regeneration is apparently possible through optimizing red blood cells. And what I just found out very recently, like within a month, if you combine that with optimizing the blood vessels, apparently your whole body will regenerate. This is like something very new, and I haven't taken it all the way to the finish line, but the initial results are absolutely spectacular. So I just would like people to know it appears as if we are now in an arena of human regeneration where you can restore vision, restore all your hair to its original color, its texture, its volume, heal internal injuries. I actually had some internal injuries for a long time that I probably should have been in a hospital for them and gotten
Oh,
surgery, but they're healing up now, which is
oh,
kind of amazing that you can do that
yeah.
just through nutrition. So if that would be an interesting topic, I would say that for me is one of the most spectacular things I've seen before we get to the finale.
Oh, that is so awesome. And I have to tell you, I've just to be general about it, I've also made a huge discovery that has just shifted my mindset on eating and food. And I really enjoy what you're talking about too, because it's like the door is open to almost any concept that we thought to be true, to shift it, to change, to be bigger, to be more conscious, to be more powerful. And I feel that's what all of this suppression is, that we are powerful beings. And as long as we're kept small and in victim mode and our energy is utilized, that we are in this time of now discovering that. And you are on the forefront of that. I love, man, I so enjoy that. All right, go into the practice if you would, Tim.
Just be
Okay, so
practice.
what I'm going to try to whip through here is some ideas on the path to enlightenment in 10 minutes or less, and let's see what we can do with this. So
Let's do it.
basically, in Atlantis, we were looking at life in terms of physical, mental, and spiritual. So what would the path to enlightenment really be if we weren't to be vague about it, if we were to be specific about it? That's a joke from one of the characters in my fiction. He has a saying, the more vague you are, the more useless. So I'm going to try to be as
Oh,
specific as I possibly can.
okay.
Okay, so in relation to enlightenment, what is enlightenment? Well, we can think of it as just knowledge of everything. And in classic spiritual books I read as a kid, it was like so and so became enlightened and they laughed at the ignorance of everybody and then snoozed under trees. And I thought, okay, well, I'm aspiring to something a little bit bigger than that. So what would that be? Okay, so for me, what if we looked at enlightenment in terms of the human energy field, the aura? Now, people are probably familiar with Kirlian photography, where you can take a photograph of someone and actually see the aura coming off the body. So I'm certified in a field called bioacoustics. So in bioacoustics, you take a vocal print, you have
Mhm.
someone speak into a microphone for 40 to 44 seconds, you plot it into a computer program. It shows you the frequencies that are coming out of your voice when you speak. The goal is to be balanced on all frequencies. It's kind of like being balanced on all the notes in an octave. If you're balanced on all notes, then you're healthy. So what if the same thing applies to the human aura? What if there are 7 notes in an octave that are unique? The eighth note is just the initial note repeated at twice the frequency. So there's 7 unique notes in an octave. There are 7 unique colors in the rainbow. So what if we were looking at the human aura in a camera and we decided that our goal was to see balance in all 7 colors of the rainbow of that aura? We would try to balance the aura in 3 different ways: the cleanliness of the chakras spinning, their color, their frequency, and the amplitude at which the chakras are spinning. How would we do that physically? We do that through mastering the 10 basics of civilization, which are in order: water, sanitation, food, shelter, power, heating, cooling, lighting, telecommunication, and transportation. Combine that with health and fitness. What you would do is create a working environment where the human aura, living in the right physical circumstances, is as bright and as clear and as frequency balanced as it could possibly be. That's physical enlightenment. We would then go from there to mental enlightenment through the Atlantean 7-step program. Now, the first 6 steps of that program are largely mental, and the 7th step is the spiritual one. So what were the steps in the Atlantean program? Step 1, I call math and materials. Step 2, geometry and architecture. Step 3, logic and flows. Step 4, vibration and chemistry. Step 5, spectroscopy and astronomy. Step 6, music and being. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview of what those were. Math and materials. You learn the nature of the universe that you're living in, how to work with materials, how math works so that you can see the math in all the things that are happening around you. Geometry and architecture enables you to build your home in harmony with nature and keep it standing. Step 3, logic and flows, enables your home to become not just static, but dynamic with flows of life force, electricity, and water going into your house in an incredibly efficient way, promoting life force, extending your lifespan. Vibration and chemistry allows you to take the elements in your environment and transform them from one element to another as needed. Apparently, this was done in nature. There's a controversial book that's been put out there. We're apparently going to link this book. It's called Biological Transmutation. It states that bacteria are able to transmute elements at room temperature. Imagine human beings doing the same thing. How many trade wars would there be over rare earth minerals if we could simply use bacteria to transform local minerals into whatever mineral we wanted to have? Spectroscopy and astronomy. We can look into the stars. We can see life on other planets. Music and being. There's a whole paper at my website called The Musical Design of Species, which suggests the most fundamental force in all the cosmos is actually music. DNA has its roots in music. The chambers of the Great Pyramid are encoded to the frequencies of music that are in DNA. To fully appreciate this, you'll need to read the paper that's at my website. But we see that music is also based on a special ratio of the golden mean, because the musical frequencies in a proper natural musical scale are largely based on the golden mean, as are the solfeggio tones that are often used to heal in certain forms of frequency healing. What you begin to see is that when you are completely in harmony with nature, bodies assume shapes of beauty. In other words, the golden mean becomes present all over the human body. People are probably familiar with the diagram of Leonardo da Vinci, where there's a circle and a square around a human being. But all the ratios in the human being, of the finger, of the forearm to the rest of the arm, the body from the navel up, above, and below, all of these are golden mean ratios. There are hidden equilateral triangles, hidden circles, hidden squares. The more you ingest food and water in harmony with nature, the more you become a being of actual beauty. This leads us finally to the 7th spiritual step of ascension, which is final revelation. So what happened in final revelation? There were 2 versions of it. There was a negative version that was practiced by the corrupted mystery schools in ancient Egypt, and there was a more positive version that was practiced by the Atlanteans. Now, I happen to think that the Atlantean version involved initiates going through a labyrinth. And when they got to the core of the labyrinth, this was the culmination of the entire progression through the 7 steps. And when they got to the core of the labyrinth, if they had the skill to do that and negotiate all the obstacles to get there, they had an out-of-body experience. The soul left the body and went to realms existing on other vibrations. So I mentioned earlier in my spiritual beliefs that there are realms vibrating on other frequencies. In final revelation, your soul left your body and you visited these realms directly. For people who are curious how this can be done, I have had my soul leave my body a multitude of times. One of the practices I'll toss out there for any it might benefit is what I call astrokinetics. I just invented that word. But basically what happens is when you're lying down and you're sleeping, and you're getting very, very tired and you're just about to drift away, imagine yourself doing jumping jacks, but don't actually do jumping jacks. Just move your life force. Imagine vividly that you're doing jumping jacks. If you do that with sufficient intensity, you will create a vibration in your pineal gland that will trigger eventually an out-of-body experience where your soul can leave your body. And you need to focus on where you want to be. And I recommend strongly that you have the most positive possible spirit when you're trying to do this kind of thing. And you can visit realms on other frequencies. You can see that there is life beyond death. This was a secret known to everyone who was initiated in the ancient mystery schools, that the soul does transcend this lifetime. There is life beyond death. And you are going through a process of tuning your soul to what vibrations you wish to be attuned to. You can either work in harmony with nature or work against it in conquest. And as the great Victor Schauberger said, think an octave higher. Only in harmony with nature do souls ascend in vibration. And it is best to follow his other main piece of advice: comprehend and imitate nature. We're going to provide some links that we've talked about privately, including patterns in nature and the self-made tapestry, where you can learn more about the design of nature and how to harmonize with it. But when you do that, you increase your vibration, you increase the chances that your soul ascends and tunes out of this messy world to a much better one.
Woo! Let's drop the mic. That was really, really awesome. Tim, in order to get you some groceries, what is the best way to feed you? I know we've got your books up here, purchasing your books, going to your website, because you are a mastermind of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge. Okay, so how can we support you? Because I also, for those listening, I feel that you were very supported with everything that all the information that Tim delivered. Okay, how can we be there for you?
So my website is called Polytope Press,
Yeah.
Polytope space press, and we'll hopefully have a link to that in the description. So just
Yes.
visit, take a look around. There's a lot of free stuff. If you just want to take a look at the free stuff and let me know you're a positive person and you're happy, that helps my day too. But if you want to buy any of the books, just take a look at all the sections of the website, and if anything strikes your fancy, you can definitely purchase it. I'll survive. I'm pretty good at surviving. I survived for a long period of time. It's pretty difficult when the cabal is trying to stop everything that you do. Just as a
Yes.
very quick example, I was trying to switch merchant services to get away from some of the banksters a little bit more.
Yeah.
And this just happened like within 48 hours. I received an email back to me and it said, "We're sorry, but after looking at your website, we have
Ooh.
decided that you do not qualify due to being on our prohibited products list.
Uh-huh.
Prohibited products list. So healing with nature, hidden history of
Uh-huh.
humanity, trying to lead people to enlightenment, that is apparently prohibited.
Oh, I
So
know.
it is tough to survive. So,
It
but in
is.
any case, I do want people to act mainly out of a spirit of joy, though. So, if you see something that resonates with you and you want to get better with it, definitely chime in, and I'll welcome visits and positive emails.
Oh my God. You are a classy individual, and I hear you. It is when you talk about things that the cabal doesn't want, or the Draco don't want, you get, I'm censored a lot, yet to just keep going, to know again that we are all in this together. And if just we affect one person, or wake up one person, or give good energy to one person, that is going to change the whole planet. So Tim, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your knowledge. All right, everybody, y'all hang in next week. We are just evolving. Things are speeding up. It's great. Thanks again, Tim. Please say goodbye because I can't see you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate you giving me a chance to share my voice.
Yeah, it was awesome. All right, y'all. See y'all. Y'all, find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, True Social, as well as Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, plus a plethora of other audio directories like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So like, subscribe, do it all. See ya.